So the meaning of Olam is that when you finish a Masechta, that then you start the next Masechta. You don't do the whole Daf, but we're going to start the Mishnah, and by way of introduction, we're then going to talk about the primary concept that this parak speaks about. So we begin Daf Beis, new Masechta, Masechta Shabbos, parak Yitzias HaShabbos, which, like the title of the parak, talks about Yitzias HaShabbos. It talks about the transfers on Shabbos, which is taking out from one domain to another domain. So we're just going to look at a quick introduction over here. Akdama Masechta Shabbos. Again, we're here in Kalzach and Yecheskel. We are Pesach B'chvei Dachsanya. Once we just learned that Gemara, we have to say thank you to Tom's River Learning Center, Rabbi Rappberg Shul, the Olam here. It's Mamish. It's Kiddush Hashem, Ein L'Shayr, and Baruch Hashem. We're looking forward to taking this Mitzvah Hashem to the next building, and there should be a schus for the whole kil over here. Everyone here in the Daf Yomi, Chevra, everyone that's not even Asher Yeshnepai, Asher Nenepai, people that are all over the world with this shiur. Mitzvah Shem, we should have a lot of siyat d'shmaya with this Masechta and future Masechtas with technology and whatnot. And we thank Daf HaChaim, which the graphics we're going to be using is from Chaim Shmuel Friedman, who was the brainchild and the CEO of Daf HaChaim, which he made groundbreaking work for Gemara in general, and especially for the Daf Yomi, where he put together, he's a graphic artist, and he took his Kishroinus, Kabbath Hashem Mahoincha, he went and he took it and he utilized it for Habatzas HaTorah, where he changed forever the face of Daf Yomi and learning of Gemara by making the introductions and the review, and many other parts, but that was the landmark, what he had done, which he made flowcharts and different graphics. And Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to be using it, and another groundbreaking milestone, we're going to be using it Mitzvah Hashem in the shiur itself. So as we're going to be learning, we're going to be Mitzvah Hashem using technology with graphics and charts to show exactly, as we're learning, what we're discussing, so that we have not only the audio, but we also have the visual components of Daf HaChaim. And we thank Torah Anytime, who's been hosting us since the beginning, and Baruch Hashem, there's a lot of siyat d'shmaya with that too, and that they were Yefutza Ma'nasecha Chutza, that all over the world, people are participating with Torah Anytime, so we thank them too. So the primary concept that we're going to be speaking about in this parak, the first parak of Masechta Shabbos, is the four reshuyas as they apply to the laws of Shabbos. There's Reshus HaYachid, and we're going to be discussing for today these four domains. Reshus HaYachid means a private domain. Reshus HaRabbim is a public domain. Then there's Carmelis, which is a rabbinic domain. Am I supposed to be using the stylus over here to show whatever, or this is good? It's not going to show up? What? No, I'm saying we have. No, I'm just okay. We're just discussing. This is also partly like a what do you call it? Okay, so then there's a rabbinic domain known as a Carmelis. So we're going to explain all these four domains, and I have something that's called a Mokum Pater, an exempted area. So what's considered a Reshus HaYachid? So as you see in this graphic, a Reshus HaYachid is anything that has a height of 10 tfachim, and it's a squared area of 4 tfachim. So as we're going to explain in the next slide, that it could be something that has an airspace of that, where it's surrounded by that area, or it itself is even on top of that. So you could have, let's say, like a mailbox, something that if it's 4 tfachim square and 10 tfachim high, that could be considered a Reshus HaYachid. Something on top of that is in a Reshus HaYachid, or it could be inside that airspace, but it's an enclosed area of 10 tfachim height and 4 tfachim wide. So some of the primary elements that's important to know regarding Reshus HaYachid, it's that it's surrounded with walls that are 10 tfachim high, with an area of 4 tfachim square inside. Now, it's not only in height. Same thing applies to in depth. If you have a ditch that's 10 tfachim deep and 4 tfachim squared, you have for yourself a Reshus HaYachid, or even a mound, like we showed in the previous picture. Now, if it's circle, and some of these ideas I'm mentioning because they're going to be coming up in these next few dafim, which we'll describe it as we get to there. And let's say the Reshus HaYachid is a circle, so that's going to be for the sugya of Kaveras, then you have to be able to square it out 4 by 4. It has to be a perfect square, a 4x4. So if you have a circle, even if it's bigger, but it has to be that a square could fit into that circle, then it'll be a Rishus HaYachid. Now, this halacha applies even if it's in the Rishus HaRabim. So you have in the middle of a street, you have something that has these dimensions, it's a Rishus HaYachid. In the street, this is going to be considered private domain if it has those dimensions of 10 tefachim high and 4 tefachim squared. Now, so too, an important halacha regarding Rishus HaYachid is that the airspace of Rishus HaYachid goes up until the sky. So over someone's house, over his yard, if he has an Eruv, so up until the sky is considered Rishus HaYachid, as we'll see in contrast to other domains, they don't go higher than 10 tefachim. So technically, you could throw something over a street, if it's higher than 10 tefachim, that depends if we learn that Zerik from Moshe. We'll talk about that, but essentially, if you're carrying something over 10 tefachim, you're not really carrying a Rishus HaRabim. A Rishus HaYachid goes up until the sky. Additionally, and again, I'm pointing this out because this will be coming up in the Dafim, that a crevice in Rishus HaYachid has the same halacha like the Rishus HaYachid itself. So let's say in the wall, it has a hole, a crack in the wall. No matter what the crack in the wall is, what the crevice is, that is considered like part of the Rishus HaYachid. It has the same halacha as Rishus HaYachid. The next domain is Ve'ezehi Rishus HaRabim. And we're going to be discussing these laws primarily actually on Daf Vav, where Gemara brings a brisa that discusses these Daled Rishuyas. But as oftentimes in Talmudic literature, it doesn't necessarily come in right away. So we're giving this introduction. We're going to jump right in as we do the first Daf, Mitzvah Shem, tomorrow. So what's Rishus HaRabim? So these are Saratia, highways, Platya Gedola, public plazas, Mavoy Samafaloshin. We have large unblocked streets. That's considered a Rishus HaRabim Gemura. So some of the important halachas that we're going to learn about by Rishus HaRabim is that it's a public thoroughfare that's 16 amas wide. Those are the dimensions it needs to have to be Rishus HaRabim. It cannot have walls. Now, if it has walls, it could be considered as a Rishus HaRabim if there are gates that are open, they're not even closed at nighttime. And they're directly opposite. That's why you probably hear about when you hear things about Eruv, and you can't make it Eruv, Rishus HaRabim, Ocean Parkway, Route 9. They're discussing, do they go from one side to the other? Are they straight? Because if they turn, it's not necessarily going to be Rishus HaRabim. It has to be straight, and it's open one to the other, it's flush, and they're not even closed at nighttime. That would be considered Rishus HaRabim. Now, the reason why that was because that's how it was in the Midbar, and we're going to learn about all the malachas, including Haitzah, which is it's actually the 39th malacha, and Tosis actually discusses, we'll mention Mitzvah Shem tomorrow, why we're starting off with malacha of Yitzhi. It's the last one. We should be talking about in the order of what starts in Erev Shabbos, because Tosis will explain why that is, but the point is that that's how it was in the Midbar. In the Midbar, that was the dimensions, there's going to be a Gemara that's going to explain how do we know that, because how big was the wagons and what they were carrying and all those things, all the malachas I learned from there, we're going to see that the dimensions were at least 16 amas, and therefore that was the dimensions of what a Rishus HaRabim is. Additionally, the street cannot be covered. If it's covered, it does not have halacha as a Rishus HaRabim. There's a machlekes, well-known machlekes, and it comes up with Eruvin, if it requires 600,000 passerby every single day to be considered Rishus HaRabim. Now, so that's what Ocean Park, all these different places they can discuss how many people are passing by. The reason for that is because the Jewish people had every single day in the Rishus HaRabim 600,000 people. They were all over there. So maybe to be considered Rishus HaRabim, you would have to have 600,000 passerby every day. Additionally, as we mentioned before, in contrast to Rishus HaYachid, Rishus HaRabim is only until 10 tefachim of its airspace. Above 10 tefachim, Rishus HaRabim actually does not have halacha as being in the street, in the Rishus HaRabim. It only goes up until the 10 tefachim. It's called a Makom Pater, and we'll discuss shortly. That's the fourth domain. It's considered an exempt space. It has no halachic constrictions, constraints. Here, in contrast also to Rishus HaYachid, if you have a crack in the wall, and again, this might seem like minutia, but I'm bringing it up because it's going to be in the Dafim, and we're going to talk about it. It's going to be like, what? So it's just important to get this once we're discussing the Rishuyas. If there's crevices in the walls towards Rishus HaRabim, so if the crack in the wall facing the street is above 3 tefachim, it's not Rishus HaRabim. As we'll see, if something is within 3 tefachim from the ground, we consider that Rishus HaRabim. Like we always talk about 3 tefachim. If you get the halachic concepts, we'll see Masechta Sukkah, there's something called Lavud. If it's within 3 tefachim, we view it as if it's part of that area. So if something is within 3 tefachim, like a crack in the wall within 3 tefachim from the ground, we consider Rishus HaRabim. But if it's above 3 tefachim, it's not Rishus HaRabim. Rather, then it's going to depend on the hole of the size of the hole. How big is the hole in the wall? If it's above 10 tefachim and it's the crack in the wall is, and 10 tefachim is not so high, you could have this. If you have this wall abutting a Rishus HaRabim, so if it's above 10 tefachim, which is whatever it is, how high is 10 tefachim? You see those mechitzas and those shuls that go with 10 tefachim. It's not so high, and it's 4 by 4 tefachim squared inside the crack. So actually, then it has halacha like Rishus HaYachid. because it's above 10 tvachim, and it's an area of 4 tvachim squared. Now, if it's lower down, let's say it's within 3 tvachim and 10 tvachim, so then actually it's going to depend how wide it is. If it's 4 tvachim squared, then it's going to have the halacha as a karmelis. We're going to discuss right now what a karmelis is, but that's like a rabbinic prohibited area. If it's less than that, so it's within 3 tvachim and 10 tvachim, and it's, let's say, just 2 tvachim squared, it's going to have a halacha like a makam pater. There's no violation at all to take that from that crack to the street or to Rishus Yachid. It's a makam pater, what literally means to say an exempted area. Now, what we just spoke about is this graphic. It's not so clear for some reason. Oh, it's a little foggy, I'm not sure why. So if someone throws 4 amas on the wall, this is where we're going to see the relevancy of this idea. So if it's above 10 tfachim, where he's throwing it, we said, this is a good application where you see some of the ideas we're discussing, as it's going to come up in a Gemara later on. If you're throwing above 10 tfachim, it's like you're throwing in the airspace. You didn't do anything wrong, because it's above 10 tfachim. Now, if it's, we said that depending on the size of the crack, if let's say the crack is less than 4 tfachim squared, so then it's going to be considered like a makam pater when it lands in the crack. Now, let's say he throws it beneath 10 tfachim, it's like he's throwing it on the ground, and then it's going to have the significance of, if it's less than 10 tfachim, it might be a problem because you're going to be doing it, you're throwing a daled amas in Rishus Harabim because you threw it beneath 10 tfachim, and then there could be a violation. It also could depend the crack that it's falling into, what the halach is going to be regarding what Rishus it's falling into. Now, the idea we're actually going to start off on the first daf in Masechtas Shabbos is going to be about the 2 biblical domains, Rishus HaYachid and Rishus Harabim, which there is a violation of carrying from either one domain to the other domain. Now, one is called Haitzah and one is called Hachnasa. Haitzah is when you're taking out from a private domain to a public domain. So if someone takes something from his house and he walks into the street, then that's a biblical violation of Haitzah, which is one of the Lamates Malachas, the 39th prohibited activity to be done on Shabbos. Now, the same thing as our Gemara, actually the first stop will have a large discussion about this, is also taken from Rishus Harabim to Rishus HaYachid, which actually that's not explicitly the biblical violation. What's called Hachnasa, bringing something in from the street to one's house. Now, if this is done by mistake, so that's a chiyuv of chatas, and we'll see that the wording here is important for the next daf after that, daf gimel, that regarding there's a liability of a karma chatas if someone did it by mistake, and meaning by mistake doesn't mean he didn't realize that he's doing something. It means he in other words, we'll see later on the Masechta, there's a difference between masasik and b'shaik. That masasik is you're totally absent-minded. You didn't realize, you thought you're picking up something that's detached, and you picked up something that's attached. Shaykh is that you didn't know, let's say, that it's prohibited, you didn't know that today's Shabbos, you didn't know you're not allowed to do that. So if someone does it by mistake, he's chayav achatas. If someone does it deliberately, he's chayav karis if he doesn't have a proper warning. He did it deliberately, but there was no warning, then there's a punishment of karis that he dies young, and so too it applies to his children. And if he did it deliberately and he had a proper warning, then he gets the Mises Bezdin of Skila. Now, some of the laws of Haitzah is that it's only biblical violation if it's between the Rishus HaYachid and Rishus Harabim. It has to go from a private domain to a public domain. In contrast, like we'll talk about a Carmelis and Makam Pater, that doesn't apply, and it's important to differentiate because we're just used to, we're not allowed to do things, but it's important to know what's biblical, what's rabbinic. It comes up in very practical, let's say regarding Suffolk and regarding other leniencies. Additionally, another case of Haitzah is not only taking out from one domain to another domain, it's also carrying 4 amis in Rishus Harabim. That's included in the malacha of Haitzah. So although you're not really taking out from one domain to another domain, but as we'll learn later on, that's included in carrying 4 amis in Rishus Harabim. That also has the same halacha and the same malacha of Haitzah. It's also possibly certain types of passing, when you're passing from one domain to another domain, although you're not taking it out, you're passing your hand over, but that's also considered in that violation of Haitzah. And then there's also a rabbinic violation of Haitzah that applies to Carmelis, which we're going to go now and discuss. A Carmelis, so although biblically there's no problem, but rabbinically it applies to Carmelis. And however, it's permitted in a Makam Pater. So if we spoke about an area that's very small, that's not bottled to the Rishus Harabim, but it doesn't have the dimensions of a Carmelis, as we'll explain the last domain is a Makam Pater, you're allowed to actually move it from there to the street, from there to a house. You're allowed to do all these things because it's not a constraint, it's not a restricted area. But the Gemara is going to tell us you're not allowed to use it as a point of transfer. because then you might come to actually carry directly. So let's say you have a Makom Pater between the Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah. So you're allowed to take it from the street to that Makom Pater, or from that Makom Pater to the house. You're allowed to do it because it's a permitted, it's like a Switzerland area type of thing. It has, but you're not allowed to go and use it as a point of transfer. If you do that, then you might come to actually carry directly, and therefore that you're not allowed to do. So although you're allowed to carry from there to the other domains, you cannot make it as a point of transfer. The third domain is what's known as a Carmelist. I'll explain the Gemara why it's called a Carmelist, but those are areas like the sea, like open fields, like the areas of the benches of where the people who would sell their wares had those benches. So that's not like a Rosh Hashanah, and it's not like a Rosh Hashanah. It's a Carmelist. It's the Rabbanan said, although really in biblical law it also has halacha like a Makom Pater, but rabbinically they gave it the limitations, but the leniencies of Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah. So although it's a prohibited area, but it's not going to have more severe than both Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah. So let's say, for example, and we're going to discuss in the next slide, the Rosh Hashanah is limited. It has to have at least an area of 4 tvachim squared and 10 and up and an area of 10 tvachim high. So that's also going to be the limitation of this Carmelist. It has to have also those dimensions too. And Rosh Hashanah, it has certain limitations. That's also going to apply to Carmelist, meaning above 10 tvachim, let's say Rosh Hashanah doesn't apply. Carmelist also won't have it. So it has the stringency of being a rabbinically prohibited area, but it's not going to be any worse in both Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah, which it takes on some of those elements. So by a Carmelist, and this is going to be important because we're going to open up this Masechta, and many people learn this Mishnah, and they're very confused about the computations of that the Mishnah opens up with. The Mishnah is going to open up, Yitzias HaShabbos, Shtayim Shein Arba B'fnim, for Shtayim Shein Arba B'chutz. It's going to say it's 2 that's really 4 for the guy inside, and it's 2 that's 4 for the guy on the outside. So what's 2 that's 4? So just to explain it now, we'll explain when we do the Daf Yomi tomorrow. 2 that's 4 means to say that there's 2 biblically prohibited malachas for the person on the inside, where we call him the balabayis or the usher, the guy who lives in the house, and we have 2 that's 4 for the one on the outside. We call him the ani, the pauper, the guy who's not inside the house, he's outside. So each one has 2 biblically prohibited malachas. What are the 2 biblically prohibited malachas? It's haitzah and nachnasa, as we'll explain the Gemara. The Gemara is going to go through all question and answer as it does in Talmudic discourse, but the guy inside, he's not allowed to take stuff outside, and he's not allowed to take stuff from outside inside. So too for the guy on the outside, the ani we call him. He's the guy b'chutz. He cannot take stuff from outside inside, and he also cannot take from stuff inside outside. So those are 2 things that each one, the guy on the inside and the outside, have as biblically prohibited. Haitzah nachnasa. Then the Mishnah says it's 2 that's 4. Okay. What does that mean? That's 4. Meaning there's another 2 that are also rabbinically prohibited, which on this slide we're showing is pater aval aser. There are certain situations where we say, this is regarding a Carmelist, but in our Mishnah we're going to be discussing it regarding a different rabbinic law. In rabbinic law, if you'll notice, in our Masechta we're going to say many times this concept, pater aval aser. What does that mean? It means to say, you're not allowed to do this thing, but you're exempt. Why are you exempt if it's for aser? Because it's not biblically prohibited. You only get a chiyuv of chatas or a chiyuv misa if you're violating a biblical violation. The Rabbanan could do Markas Mardis, they could do rabbinic lashes, but generally there's no punishment, there's no penalty if it's just rabbinic law. So you're going to be exempt, but it's prohibited. That's why in our Mishnah we're going to say that's 2 that's 4. There's another 2 that rabbinically are prohibited. And why are those rabbinically prohibited? That's because you're doing half of the malacha. What's important to know in haitzah is that there's 2 elements. There's taking out, but taking out has 2 parts. You have to do what's called an akira, you have to pick it up, and you have to do hanach, and you have to put it down. And that's going to be one of the main ideas in the coming Mishnah, that we have these 2 people. One is passing it, and the other one is taking it. Who did the akira? Who did the hanacha? If you did both, picking it up and putting it down, then that was the biblical violation, and the person is chayav chatas. If you only did one of them, you only did half. You didn't do the biblical violation of haitzah or hachnasa. That's going to be the shehin arba. Doesn't mean that's another 4. It means it's 4 because you have another 2, that you can have cases where you did half of the malacha of haitzah achnasa by either picking it up to take it out or picking it up to bring it in. And therefore, that's going to be another 2, because it's only rabbinically prohibited, like the Carmelist, which is pat aval aser. Someone carries from a Carmelist to a Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah, he's done just a rabbinic violation. So a Carmelist has to be at least 4 by 4 tvachim, and it has to be lower than 10 tvachim, because we said it has the limitations of both Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah. Same thing would apply to a ditch. If it's in the depth, you dug an area of 4 by 4 tvachim squared, and it's lower than 10 tvachim, biblically, this is considered makom pater, but this is a rabbinic violation. Now, as we just mentioned before, there's also certain reshus hayachids that we gave it a rabbinic halacha as a carmelist, like for example a karpifis. Karpifis are enclosed areas, and this is actually very important. It comes up a lot in, let's say, by Tchumen, when they talked about were you allowed to walk in Lakewood and Times River, were you allowed to walk to, so they discuss what's a park. What do we view as Ocean County Park? Is that a reshus hayachid? It's not reshus harabim. So they discuss, is that a carmelist, because that's what's known as karpifis. It's an enclosed area, but it's not for dwelling purposes. So rabbinically, we gave these areas, like gardens that are more than Beis Sasayim, which is like a park, we gave it a halacha as a carmelist because it's not, it's closed in, it's a private area, but it's not meant for dwelling purposes. So they talk about, does someone live over there? Is there someone who has a room over there? So that's where the discussion comes in, but that's because rabbinically, although that's halachically like a reshus hayachid, rabbinically we gave it a halacha as a carmelist. And like we said, it can't be less than 4 by tvachim squared and not higher than 10 tvachim. Now, this is just a graph illustrating this idea that a carmelist cannot be less than 4 tvachim squared, and it only goes up until a height of 10 tvachim. But again, as we're going to discuss in the next slide, a makom pater is going to be less than that, like 3 by 3 tvachim squared. Reshus harabim, as you see on the right side, goes also only up until the area of 10 tvachim. Reshus hayachid, which is with the blue tile, that goes ad l'rikiya, that goes all the way up until the sky. In contrast to the other domains, like we're saying, reshus harabim and carmelists are limited to 10 tvachim. Now, what's a makom pater? A makom patur it means literally an exempted area. So that's if it's less than 4 by 4 tvachim squared. Let's say it's an area of 3 by 3, like we saw in the previous slide. That tile was 3 by 3 area, but it's above 3 tvachim. This halacha is possible only in the reshus harabim. So in the reshus harabim, in a street, if you have something that's less than 4 by 4 tvachim squared, but it's above 3 tvachim. So we're not considering it as part of reshus harabim. If it was within 3 tvachim, we consider that as like part of the street. Like, okay, the street is not perfectly flat. You're going to have things that are, so that's going to be considered part of reshus harabim. But if you have something that's more than, even just a mound, that's more than 3 tvachim above the ground, but it's less than 4 by 4 tvachim squared, because if you have a mound that's much bigger, it's already could be reshus hayachid, it could be a carmelist. But it's less than 4 by 4 tvachim squared above 3 tvachim, then in reshus harabim, we consider that a makom patur. And now, additionally, as we mentioned before, any area above 10 tvachim, like someone had asked before, above a reshus harabim or above a carmelist, as you saw in the previous slide, they only go up until 10 tvachim high. What's that domain considered above those 10 tvachim? That is considered as a makom patur. Also, that's also considered an exempted area. There's no limitations on that area. We said you cannot do certain possible transfers, but that area is considered makom patur, and there's no problem about picking up from there to the street or to a reshus hayachid. Now, this is just to discuss that we talked about this idea about taking from one domain to another domain, just to see how the practical application could be that you could have in the street. Let's say, look at the left side, where you have a rock that's 4 tvachim squared and it's 10 tvachim high. So even though you're in the street, if you're picking up, let's say, a loaf of bread, as this picture would have it, and putting it on top of that rock, what a person just did is that he did the biblical malacha of haitzah. He picked up something from a reshus harabim and he put it onto a reshus hayachid, because it is 10 tvachim high and it's 4 tvachim squared. But if it's less than 10 tvachim high or 4 tvachim wide, then the person would be pater. Okay, we'll stop over here, and Mitzvah will start tomorrow, Daf Beis, Masechta Shabbos.